Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. And I like video games. In fact, back in the day, I used to be a big gamer. However, contrary to the slogan, which I pretty much retain for branding purposes at this point, I do not have much free time, and therefore I do not play as many video games as I'd like. One of the games or series of games I've always wanted to play but never quite got round to was Fallout. It seems like a fascinating concept. The dystopian, open-world adventure really captures my attention. Fallout as a game series has been going on for a few decades, and with critical acclaim and popularity, it quickly obtained a substantial fan base which spilled over into the internet gaming scene and launched the careers of a lot of creators. It's not just the gameplay of Fallout that seems to attract a lot of attention, but it's also the lore, the stories, and the mystery in a way. When playing games, we might experience something that provokes a question in our head, makes us think, I wonder what the story is behind them. And like creators who delve into the mysteries of the internet, for example, the gaming equivalent of these creators gain prominence with the same sort of approach. Talking about the mysterious backgrounds of some characters, and out of the roots came a YouTuber known as Oxhorn, the Fallout lore investigator with a creamy voice. His videos delving into various cases, stories, and features most prominently gained traction over the 2017 to 2018 period. Now this wasn't Oxhorn's first venture on the platform. In fact, he is one of the older creators as the platform's history goes. Prior to the Oxhorn channel, he had a channel named Oxhorn Movies in which he uploaded World of Warcraft related content, which was certainly interesting to say the least.
Rafflemouth.
This has 17 million views, by the way. Good luck ever obtaining that sort of success with this sort of content. He made the comment that he started making movies in around 2004 and therefore he must have pre-existed the platform with his interests. However, in 2013 he decided it was time to move on from this brand of content and into other ventures. He had a podcast that he called Scotch and Smoke Rings. He also had a website where he advertised beard care, grow a beard now, and he had his own personal blog, bloggingwithclass.com. Now, when someone's on the internet for such a long time, it's natural that they've probably got a lot of history, a lot of pages up there that documents their journey. However, sometimes when we look over a person's journey, we see a few potholes they may have encountered, and we want to know how they would address it. These are two separate processes that can definitely shape the perception of a creator and the possible implications regarding their reputation. There's a lot more to the drama than meets the eye, but I found myself being contacted a lot about this, and I was, to be honest, quite confused, because drama has a rather straightforward formula. One side presents their case, another side presents their case, and then the beleaguered, bewildered audience try and pick a side on the basis of what truths they can hopefully take away. And this isn't anything particularly huge on the surface. Why would people want me to do a video on this bloke? As far as I could see, a fairly inoffensive Fallout channel that isn't pulling so many views these days. Well, when I began to spend more time researching content and watching the videos on it, I very quickly realized why people were messaging me, because the truths that I just spoke about, they're not really clear. The videos on him were long, I mean very long, and some of you creators clearly didn't get the memo because only I'm allowed to do long videos with pretentious rants. But I watched them because The Right Opinion is a trooper, out on the front lines, watching the videos so you don't have to. But now we set the scene, I want to lay out the situation, because I know a lot of you guys will probably not have a clue what I'm talking about. Don't worry, Papa James is here to enlighten you. So Oxhorn has appeared to have been embroiled in drama over a rather murky time period. At first, it appeared to just be criticism of his content and some of the coverage of Fallout games, but his response to this criticism, which we'll get into in a moment, appeared to rub people the wrong way, and what happens is what you'd expect. He made a few enemies, and internet history and enemies don't go too well. What these people found was his blog, which had some fairly questionable views and propaganda published. They found some of his old tweets, some articles that he had written himself on various matters, including homosexuality, and on top of this they found other videos that showed him not quite as the sort of person he presents himself today. This was piled alongside what many thought was his biased coverage of games such as Fallout 76 and Fallout 4, and that led to suspicions of whether he had ulterior motives for supporting it. On the surface, it created the narrative that he might be a homophobe with a bad taste in games, but digging deeper, some people felt it made much of his content disingenuous and that he was just an opportunist, espousing the view views that got him the ad rev. At first there was little public response from Oxhorn, however as the pressure continued to mount and people began to question whether he still held some of his positions, he decided to upload a public response, replying to the allegations and going on the counter on many points, claiming that his critics were mostly bad faith actors obsessed with bringing a harmless guy who made a few mistakes down. This was met with support from many viewers who praised him for his calm, collected response to criticism. However, there was still a sect of people who were unconvinced about his response and claimed that actually he had a habit of being quite authoritarian towards criticism and actually had not just taken down videos, but whole channels over this matter, pretty much attempting to erase the history of his questionable behavior. This is a lot to digest, and honestly, the journey through the drama is one like a huge roller coaster. And if you get to a point in my video where you think you know which side I'm going to take, I might suggest staying a little longer. But to do that, I think we need to get back into the right style. Are you ready? Let's go. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not going to talk about Fallout a lot, because it's not my main area of expertise, and frankly there is so much discussion on it already. No, what I'm going to do is break down this drama into the section of allegations, starting with the stuff that I don't think is really the strongest, but the oldest, and you'll understand why I do that by the end of this part. As mentioned, when you've been on the internet for a long time like Oxhorn, chances are you've said some things that you wouldn't say in the present day. This may be due to a change in ideology, or just the acknowledgement that it's inappropriate for your current format. This recently came about with his blog posts. A few topics stuck out, firstly about porn, secondly about homosexuality, and thirdly about substances. Now Oxhorn at the time of these posts, by the looks of it, was a person who was pretty invested in Christianity. However, he takes the sort of Shapiro approach, doesn't really use the God said so, and tries to find some logical explanation. In this instance, some of the bases of his arguments are applied through the perspective of prevention of societal decay, and others are applied through Darwinism, and used to explain why the behavior is immoral or undesirable, as it's not evolutionarily preferable.
Right. Anyway, so that from a Darwinistic perspective, Darwinistic perspective, from the perspective of an animal that has evolved from a protozoa, or whatever, to the creature that stands before you naked and shivering now, the man. That is a man who has failed at being an animal. Animals don't run around and look at other naked animals and get their jollies that way. They really don't. That's really something that is only in mankind. You know, you don't see nude badger periodicals in the bookstore. You don't. I mean, that's just weird. You're not going to find badgers lined up to buy the latest issue of Badger Boy or whatever. Play Badger.
I mean, primates can masturbate too, mate, but I wouldn't go too far into that. The content criticizing homosexuality was written over a decade ago on Camera of Truth on Blogspot, where he basically posted articles that read like PragerU transcripts. The other content was published around 2013 time in Oxhorn's very quaintly named Manifesto, which appears to be a guide on how to behave with class. Like Oxhorn, of course, he was the embodiment of a refined gentleman. Now, I'm being quite jovial about this because I find it quite funny. Not gonna lie, maybe it's just the sentiment of it, that there is this guru of class passing on his wisdom to the onlooking plebeians, such as thou shalt not beat their meat. But I'll put this on hold to go to the homosexuality point. So he wrote a few posts back in the day about homosexuality. I found them quite amusing, but the central tone is that homosexuality is immoral, and if society deems it immoral, then they can discriminate it on the basis of morality. This led to claims that he held outdated, bigoted views. He also tweeted out some articles and responses on his Twitter at the time. I'm not here to debate it because he's already retracted it. The thing is, although he comes across as rather self-righteous, it's easy to forget that gay marriage and even remote acceptance of homosexual relationships has only really become mainstream in the last few years, and therefore I don't think it's really a thing worth exposing someone over because it wasn't an uncommon belief back then, especially if you've been raised in a very restrictive environment. With that said, I think people who may feel alienated by such views can take up their concern with him, and he can explain how he feels today, a bridge we will cross soon. The whole porn and substances thing led to a lot of allegations that he was hypocritical, the porn thing because he has mods that enable nudity in his Fallout games,
of food, caps, and water, while sitting on your them to send you tributes of.
And his comments on substances because he is a frequent drinker and smoker. Now, as far as the porn goes, I mean, he did kind of qualify his statements a few years back.
There are people in real life who do get sex and still watch pornography and masturbate. But that's for a different discussion. We're not talking about sex in general. We're talking about satisfying sex. And I get that into the article when we talk about marriage.
And it's hard to say if they're completely equivalent, although it's still a bit strange given his dispositions. He does comment on it in his response video. As for the comments on substances, although fairly disagreeable for myself, it's a case of what society has constructed, and a lot of Oxhorn's views are clearly rooted in traditionalism of what is best for society, and a lot of these substances that Oxhorn frowns upon are those ones that are classically ostracized, for reasons some more rational than others. It's not exactly hypocritical to decry them, as snobbish as it might seem. Now, what his reasoning for sacrificing these views over the last year, we've heard a few responses from him in his response video that we'll break down later.
This moment changed many beliefs that I held. After all, if I could have been so wrong about homosexuality, I could be just as wrong about the politics that I held and my views on other social issues, making nearly everything that I wrote in my 20s and early 30s outdated and not an accurate representation of the person I am today.
And people can say that he's being disingenuous and that he's afraid of losing fans, but as it stands currently, I could not say for certain that those were his motives, and although I do find the posts amusing, I wouldn't advocate dragging someone over them. If they have expressed regret for them, those were his opinions. He doesn't hold them anymore. At the end of the day, when I'm doing any sort of activist work, my ultimate goal would be to convince people to change, and if he's outwardly changed his views, then that at least is a message that he's conveying to his audience, and that's a positive at least. There is also a lot of criticism that he shills for Bethesda basically due to some misinformation in his videos, particularly in the fact that he was defending Fallout 4 and even 76. As said, I can't really comment on it. There's not really much that can be proved either way. We don't have any bank receipts, unfortunately. He might have his reasons for supporting it, but it's not the central issue here. There were also some people criticizing him for not making a video unprovoked, having to receive all these allegations to actually respond, and although I do understand that perspective, it would seem weird to me to make a video unprovoked on previous views if no one was really thinking about them. I think many people have had views they don't stand by in the past. However, they were published online, so I do understand that perspective. If I was in his position, I would have just released a public statement on Twitter or the community tab when they first arose, just got something out there. But when something was going as public as it was for him, a video must kind of come into play, even if it was left a bit too late. I think the purpose of a video at that point would be, if done right, to make sure that the other perspectives don't outshine his own, because these criticisms were gaining traction and people want to know if he genuinely still held those views. There was also an old video going around of him allegedly fat-shaming someone with, quote, too much personality, a rather mean-spirited video in which he mocked someone purchasing some food. The video was around 6 years old and posted onto his YouTube channel, and he was revealing stick for this as well.
This is what happens when you have too much personality.
The reason that I've covered these topics from earlier on in his career are because these are things that could easily be quashed. If these were the only claims, then his response would be straightforward. He's a changed man. He realizes the errors of his ways, and he won't be doing it again. And in a way, that did happen, but it was missing some details. So let's discuss his response. So the first thing that Oxhorn did was remove the incriminating evidence. Now, on principle, that is the right thing to do, as keeping them up can be seen as an implicit endorsement. And when some people started criticizing him for it, some fans and their defenses of him were mildly concerning. Why would I be scared of a faggot? Boo, motherfucker. If you don't have the same ideology, you wouldn't want it spreading, or providing the impression that you think that way. However, as I'm sure many of you know, these articles are typically archived by people, so the information is still out there. However, for his domain, which contained his manifesto, I went to search it up, as you do, and he actually placed a special request with the web archives to make sure you couldn't archive it, which is admittedly a bit of a weird move. I mean, alright, you don't want something out there, but as long as people already have screenshots, it seems strange that you would try and completely bury its existence, especially when it was just a fraction of the criticism. It does make you wonder what else was on there, but I digress. we cannot prove anything. However, with the existence of questions surrounding his mentality, it made sense that he'd finally do a video addressing these claims. As mentioned, it should have been a fairly simple dispatch of various points against him, and the comprehension that your positions have changed, and on first glance, the video does that. When I watched it first, I was pretty much done with the drama, and it seems many commenters were won over too, but when I returned one more time, things didn't seem quite right. I mean, he deals with the previous positions on homosexuality fairly reasonably, as mentioned, although he could have dealt with it sooner, placed an explanation in somewhere. Not doing so doesn't make him a bad person if he considered those views in the past, and given the very rapid expansion of his YouTube channel, he might just not really want to bring attention to it. So with that one out the way, suddenly something clicked.
Many years ago, I once pulled out my phone and recorded a person who I thought had made a poor outfit decision. I didn't talk to this person, I didn't bully this person, I was in my car with a friend, we were eating our dinner, and I chose at the time to express my befuddlement at the way this person chose to dress. And that was wrong. That wasn't kind. That's not the kind of person I am. It's not the kind of person I want to be. I realized my mistake almost as soon as I published the video to Facebook. Some viewers told me that this wasn't very kind, and upon reflection I agreed, and so I deleted the video. It got only a handful of views before I deleted it. But as is the nature of the internet, nothing ever truly disappears from the internet, and so trolls have dug up this very old video in an attempt to harm me.
Okay, but that's almost completely false. There have been claims about the girl's age, but that's not verifiable. What we do know is that this video was uploaded to YouTube and quickly became one of his most viewed videos at the time, and was still up on his channel after 3 days. This is not ambiguous, this is archived, which makes me wonder if he knew it was archived. And sure, people confuse details. When you're making comments as if they're solidified responses and playing it down as if that's a defense, then you cannot allow for that. It's also noteworthy that all the details that Oxhorn gets wrong are details that would immediately play down the severity of such incidents. And honestly, there is an inkling of suspicion in me that he does actually know how the incident went down. The only thing that completely bewilders me is why on earth would he lie about it? As far as I can tell, even if what he did has stayed up for a year and got 50,000 views, an apology would have perfectly quelled any irritation that people felt about the incident. It seems like a way to frame his mentality as impulsive, rather than what it actually was. You can regret mentalities, you don't have to bend the truth. On top of this, prior to the video, when asked about it in his Discord, he said it was a Twitter video. Is he trolling? This is a bruh moment.
Bruh.
Alright, so that was a bit of a strange explanation. It had my suspicions raised a little, but life goes on. Can't just throw someone to the dogs for a little misinformation. He then launches into this attack against the people who've been trying to fabricate the claims against him. Some very malicious actors by the looks of it.
Some people decided that I needed to be punished for that, and so they organized with their friends to harass me and to spread lies about me. They started by raiding my live streams. One guy used a donation to try and get me to say a racial slur, which he then edited into a video and then tried to spread around as if I had actually said it. Another guy fabricated a conversation between himself and another big YouTube channel using the inspect element option of Google Chrome. He was able to just swap out the HTML to have the other YouTube channel say whatever he wanted that YouTube channel to say. In this way, he started creating screenshots, spreading lies saying that this YouTube channel was working on a hit piece against me and that I had tried to bribe him to not publish that video. These are all lies, and this particular user was even punished by the other members of his Discord server for lying to them. But even though they know that it was a lie, this hasn't stopped other YouTubers from creating video content about these lies as if they could be true. That's just the way many of these trolls are. They'll use homosexuality and misogyny as weaponized tools to attack another person, but when they're alone, their everyday conversations are rife with racism, sexism, and homophobia. These organized attacks have taken a number of forms over the past few months. The original Discord server where much of this went on collapsed due to internal struggles, and so they've taken up a bunch of other Discord servers where the exact same thing is going on. It's an organized campaign to try and spin a story that puts me in a negative light.
He basically suggests this encompasses the sort of toxic mentality against him, and although I would certainly agree that those people engaging in such behavior shouldn't be empowered in any sort of way whatsoever, it's also important to look at the criticism and how it might have arisen. Oxhorn says he doesn't have any sort of problem with fair criticism.
and people are free to disagree with me about lore. I'll even hop into the comment section and have vigorous debates with people about specific lore topics. As long as everyone is respectful and kind to each other, these can turn into wonderful conversations.
And I would say this has been plaguing a lot of videos I've seen on him. They're all just loaded with the fact that these people do not like Oxhorn. And if you, as a YouTuber, believe he's manipulating his audience into thinking you're inherently toxic, you really want to make sure those videos don't come across that way. Fans will always go into the innocent until proven guilty mindset, even more strongly than most people. And therefore, you have to put forward a decent case without going into too many ad hominems, even if it's something that lights a fire in you. That's just a side note, and one that I'd try and keep in mind for the future. With that said, even though I don't think they were presented correctly, I wouldn't brand all those who have criticized him as, quote, trolls, and we'll continue that live discussion in a moment. Let's continue to watch this.
There was one time, for example, when I was doing a video on the Sunset Sarsaparilla headquarters, where I saw a Brotherhood of Steel decal on a manila envelope, and I didn't realize at the time that it came from one of my mods. Instead, I assumed that Obsidian had just reused assets from Fallout 3. Obsidian did reuse assets from Fallout 3. They reused a ton of assets. If you go into Michelangelo's sign shop, for example, we find signs from the Capital Wasteland that should not be in New Vegas at all. However, once viewers made me aware that it was a mod, I immediately went into the comment section and posted a comment correcting my mistake, and I pinned it to the top of the comment section.
Alright, so this is referring to the criticism that he was just looking to hate on Obsidian, thus shilling for Bethesda. And although he admits he was wrong about the certain detail, it seems he didn't immediately change it like he said. Although it might look like that, you can see that the pinned comment has been, quote, edited. Now, people edit pinned comments all the time. I do. That's not a big deal. But that also doesn't mean that the comment was posted immediately before any of these videos at all. There's a screenshot of him replying, "Dude, wow, just wow," in a rather condescending tone to someone who brings this up, which once again makes you wonder. With that said, a majority of his other responses are fairly straightforward. They're mostly relating to Fallout, and I do think a lot of the allegations he received on that front were fairly difficult to really do anything about, and therefore not really worth their weight in discussion. However, he does end the video on a bit of a strange note.
I'm publishing this video because people have asked why they've been seeing a flurry of anti-Oxhorn videos recommended to them on YouTube. And it's because I'm under a coordinated attack from people who are trying to punish me for playing Fallout 76. Some people are in it for the cause, other people are in it to try and grow their channels, but all of them just want to see me destroyed.
Well, don't worry, Oxhorn. I don't give a shit about Fallout 76. Let's talk about what I do give a shit about. The thing is, although his response sufficed for many people, some felt like he had omitted certain details. He does address them in the pinned comment eventually, but let's discuss the accusations first and then bring it back to that. People have been making videos on Oxhorn for a while, and on principle that's unsurprising. If you're a large creator with some hot opinions and dirty laundry, then yes, people are gonna want to talk about it. And when I watched some of these videos on him, I wasn't particularly compelled. Like, as far as I could tell, they were the sort of small YouTuber content that you will find on anyone.
I doubt your wife would be okay with you using thumbnails like this, or like this, or like this, or even this one.
Oxhorn has stated in his videos to not give in to vices, all while smoking and drinking scotch. But it is easy to let it slide strictly because most people usually don't consider alcohol or smoking to be a drug.
I mean, it's not the most persuasive stuff, and as a large YouTuber, it is fairly harmless, which is why it's confusing that Oxhorn has allegedly taken such a hardline stance against it. There are multiple creators who have come forward claiming that Oxhorn has placed community and or copyright strikes against their videos, and on top of that has been silencing criticism over this in his comment sections. The first discussed case is the one relating to a YouTuber by the name of logical_fallacy, now named Thomas Beckett. He made a video in response to Oxhorn's video defending Fallout 4. As an outsider, it was a fairly confusing video with melodramatic rhetoric that didn't quite feel like it had earned its tone.
Maybe Oxhorn could ban me from his channel, but he cannot ban the truth. And this is a new year. This is the year 2018, and this is the year that we fight back. This is the year that we take a stand against frauds like Oxhorn.
But as said, it's a video by a very small YouTuber that shouldn't really have too much of an impact. And yet, surprisingly enough, he was given a community strike for bullying, which is rather bizarre. What is even stranger is then that his channel was taken down despite supposedly not having any additional content on the matter, and with Logical receiving no further information than these emails, which attributed the removal to Oxhorn's complaints. Now, it seems strange to me, personally, that YouTube would actually disclose the plaintiff, so I sought verification of this. Now, I did speak to Logical to see if he still had a copy of the email, which he said he didn't. But not deterred, I decided to reach out to YouTube, and although they were hesitant at first, once I told them I had permission from the owner and it was pretty much all public, they did confirm it was legit, so it's not looking good for our friend Brandon here. However, I do say that with the reservation that in their first response to me, they say they don't typically name people who report other creators. So maybe the guy responding is confused here, I don't know. I'll let you make your own conclusions regardless. One thing that I would say is that in Oxhorn's response, in his pinned comment, he showed a general ignorance of the reliability of YouTube's system. At the end of the day, we're not trying to necessarily make the judgment of whether the report was right or wrong, we're trying to work out whether this was in good or bad faith. And then we have to discuss the copyright system. Now, Oxhorn has made a flurry of copyright claims in the last few years, most of them on re-uploads of clips, and although I don't necessarily agree with preventing people from being able to see these clips, see my video on Pokimane for that, he's still within his right to take them down. However, one situation stood out. This is one with a creator named Simon Mercer. Now, he posted 2 re-uploads of certain clips onto his channel. Oxhorn decided that he was going to get these videos removed, but rather than just claiming them like many YouTubers do, he filed straight up DMCA takedowns, which deals 1 strike per video. Now, as said, he is in his right to do this, but it's pretty aggressive and gives them much less channel mobility. But maybe he just perceived the uploader as having ill intent against him, and therefore it was warranted. So, clearly annoyed at receiving 2 strikes, Simon then uploads a more regular quote exposed video. As expected, it's not quite a content cop.
What I find ironic about the whole thing, though, is that a real man would admit and fix his mistakes, which Oxhorn doesn't do, despite him claiming that he's so manly.
And what Oxhorn does is he goes in for the kill. He files a 3rd takedown notice that would have terminated Sinan's account altogether. Now, fortunately, through some miracle, YouTube actually intervened and stated that it was fair use, which, given how broken the system is almost incredible. And with this, Oxhorn had fucked up. Big time, in fact. Out of anything worth, quote, exposing him over, this is the closest you get to affirmation that he has the ability to be malicious. Now, Oxhorn did not address this in the video, but he did respond to this in the pinned comments. After stating that all critical channels on him are still up, which is a strange thing to say on principle because you'll only be able to see the channels that are still up, he then speaks about this specific situation relating to Sinan. He states that the reason he made the strike was because the video included the use of an animated short that completely removed any real reason to watch his own video because it used the content in almost all its entirety. And it was fine anyhow because YouTube saved him, and therefore he didn't necessarily need to look up the legality himself. So I watched Sinan's video, and surprise surprise, Oxhorn's statement on it is false. In Sinan's video, the animated clip that he uses is just over a minute out of the video, which is 8 minutes long, and ironically enough, uploaded in its entirety on someone else's channel where it's been for the last 10 years. And to add insult to this injury, in the complaint that YouTube intervened in, Oxhorn gave different timestamps which didn't even match where Sinan used the animated short in his video. The clip he was complaining about was one where he was just talking in front of a camera. I feel that the defense from Oxhorn is rooted in the point of view that you would have to be pretty petty to go after this sort of exposed video that used information from other exposed videos and was recorded on a potato. He clearly watched it all through. He is reaching Keemstar levels of obsessed. I could barely get through 10 minutes of that video. It seems almost unbelievable, but he clearly did. His point of view is also mixed with the idea that YouTube's system is just working fine and therefore it's not a big deal. Nothing bad happened, even though his strike could have led to channel deletion. The system is completely dysfunctional, and this has been broken for ages. Even PewDiePie's been struck, and YouTube didn't magically detect it. And this has happened again and again and again. Anyone in commentary knows this. The difference is when larger channels are struck, they can stand up for themselves. Smaller channels don't have that, and someone like Sinan would have never got their channel back. And that whole attempt to strike was reckless at best. It makes the narrative that he'd do that to another channel much more plausible, and his retrospective framing of the situation is misleading, more than forgetfulness can explain. And speaking of misleading, A lot of videos that have attacked Oxhorn have focused on a lot, which in my opinion is explainable, even if Oxhorn himself has not explained them the best. On principle, I don't think that someone should have their career ended for a load of old content that we've discussed today, even if in hindsight it was done in rather poor taste. There was a video uploaded called Defending Oxhorn, released by YouTuber Average Baiters, who brand themselves as comedians. Anyhow, in this one video, it is just a single bloke, and throughout the first half of the video, he makes these sorts of defenses that I've referred to, and although I think they could have been a bit more well researched, and people were giving him far too much credit for a line that was Jack from The Simpsons, I think.
Anyways, nobody's perfect. That's why they put erasers on pencils.
Everybody makes mistakes. That's why they put erasers on pencils.
His points weren't really that incorrect. That is, until he gets to copyright. And a lot of people have been going around citing this as a defense against the attacks that Oxhorn has been receiving. And I don't think I can quite do it justice for how bad I personally believe this next set of argumentation is. So I think it's time to turn this into a little collab. And who else better served to cover this than my good friend, John Swan? I suggest we bring him in. Take it away, my friend.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Writer Pit. Wait, that is not the intro. Hello everyone, TRO has asked me to cover this joke of a video, specifically the points relating to fair use. I've studied copyright law quite extensively, so it's only fitting that the person who made this video, Average Batters, starts off this section talking about copyright, stating that he's not a lawyer, but that he can give a YouTuber's perspectives on the events surrounding Oxhorn and his copyright-related incidents, specifically on matters related to fair use. Let's watch along and see what he has to say. I'm sure it's incredibly insightful.
However, I can speak from a YouTuber's perspective and give you what I know about striking channels and what I know about fair use.
Fantastic.
If, for instance, someone steals my content and tries to pass it off as their own, then I can strike their channel. If someone takes some of my paid content, like for instance something I put on Patreon, and they show it on their channel for free, I can strike their channel. If a person takes private content of mine and shows it on their channel, I can strike their channel.
Wait, what? That's completely untrue. Now, his language is a bit convoluted here. He uses the word show and doesn't specify whether this showing involves the content being used in an expose work of some kind, or whether the content is just re-uploaded. However, judging from statements further on in the video, I'm going to have to go with the conclusion that he means showing in any capacity whatsoever. So, let's break this down. He is very correct when he says that these cases are not necessarily against fair use, because these uses are definitely fair in many contexts. But he's completely incorrect in stating that these uses are against YouTube's terms of service. If we read YouTube's terms of service, we see nothing here relating to the topics which he has discussed. But let's just say he made a mistake and he meant to say the community guidelines terms. But wait, nothing in there says anything about these topics either. In fact, no document published by YouTube says anything about posting content behind a paywall or posting content that is not publicly available, aside from their copyright-related documents, of which fair use is a valid defense. Let's keep on watching here.
This means that if someone went back and got Oxhorn's private video from years ago from his Facebook and put it on their channel to shit on him, Oxhorn would be in the right to strike the channel, as they are using content that isn't theirs to use and isn't protected under fair use as it's not publicly shared anywhere, meaning it's private property, okay?
This is a major problem with these points. I think Average Batters is under the impression that content that is not published isn't protected by the same copyright laws as a published work, in which case he would be unconditionally wrong. Unpublished works hold the same copyright status as published works, and therefore are governed by the same fair use clauses as published works. Furthermore, this has also been proved by multiple court cases on the subject. He goes off on a similar tangent here.
Therefore, only public works that receive monetary remuneration would be considered under copyright law and are protected under fair use. This means a private video of me at the beach with my family is not fair use, nor is any other private footage I don't make publicly available for entertainment consumption and copyright the works. Just like how a deleted video on Facebook isn't under fair use. As far as I'm aware, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, mate, we can easily tell that you're not a lawyer. And again, completely incorrect, and just shows how much this particular individual knows about fair use. He didn't even bother to do a quick Google search to verify what he's talking about. Another misinformed statement that completely manipulates the narrative is this one.
If I were to try to strike a channel that was using my content under fair use or wasn't doing anything wrong, and YouTube reviewed the strike and saw I was in the wrong, that I was falsely claiming something against that channel, I would risk losing my channel.
This is, once again, completely incorrect. To submit a DMCA strike on YouTube, you have to acknowledge that the strike is being made in good faith. No one, aside from the individual who submitted the strike, can genuinely verify whether the strike was made in good faith, especially when it is a grey area. YouTube can't generally step in when strikes are made, since they have to maintain their safe harbor status. Safe harbor is a provision in US copyright law that states that services like YouTube are not legally responsible for the uploading of unlicensed content by their users. There have been circumstances where it was pretty easily determined that a strike was not made in good faith, specifically if an account has been deemed as suspicious. However, for the most part, it doesn't occur. Since it is difficult to tell whether a strike was made in good faith, the channels that submit the strikes don't usually have consequences leveled against them, and thus this claim, made by average batters, is a big stretch to say the least.
Now, if someone posted a video about me and how they don't like my videos, then who cares? Have at it. Go nuts.
I just had at it. It was very entertaining. Thank you for being a buffoon and gracing us with this discrepant conglomeration of balderdash. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, John. I hope he's cleared up any qualms that can be found in the video. I'm going to leave his channel in the pinned comment. I definitely recommend checking his work out if you enjoy that sort of analysis, though he needs to upload more, so make sure you go and let him know that. To average baiters, I apologize for John's butchering of your name, but you did butcher copyright law, so we'll consider it even. However, with all this in mind, I want to begin to tie things up, though admittedly it's quite a lot to do.
I'm flying high, but I've got a feeling I'm falling.
In his response video, Oxhorn placed his critics into a collective who were all conspiring against him. And although I would agree that some of these guys clearly have ties to each other, I think they've more been united by their negative experiences with Oxhorn rather than being united prior to simulating negative experiences. And maybe originally it was born out of his opinions on Fallout. When you say something that is unpopular and kinda siding with the corporation, you're gonna get people who think you're shills. And when watching some of the oldest videos on him, that's certainly how it comes across. But eventually this manifested when people started to think that he'd overstepped his jurisdiction in responding to these. And his attempt to finish off Sign and Mercer's channel was probably where the cynicism peaked. He really doesn't like people bringing attention to this stuff. And on principle, I get it. If you have something you're ashamed of, then you don't want to be continuously dragged over it. Equally, you don't want people to look you up and that to be their first impression of you. You want the narrative to be clear. That's not what you believe. I think that's happened to a majority of creators on this platform, myself included, but there's nothing you can really do than release a statement and roll with a few punches here and there. There will be people with perceptions of you that aren't quite current or accurate. Just make sure that doesn't become prevalent. Twisting the truth in subsequent responses will inevitably come back to harm you because people will perceive it as dishonesty, and trying to cover up these things makes people question if you really understand the gravity or the consequences or even feel remorse for them in the first place. There's been a lot of evidence that Oxhorn is deleting comments on his newest video when people present counter-narratives, such as the disparity between the YouTube comment count and Social Blade comment count, as Social Blade updates after, implying that comments were being deleted post-publication, even ones that seem reasonable, just coincidentally being against him. Assumedly, a lot of people are being hidden from the channel too, and it seems he really wants to restrict the scope of what's being said to those who are basically praising him. And although it's his channel, he can do what he wants. When you're so desperate to hide something rather than just making sure the public understand all the context, people wonder what you've got to hide. On top of this, there was another account that has been defending Oxhorn in comment sections named KK, which was, funnily enough, created 4 days after the Oxhorn channel, and it's only subscribed to him, with no other activity in the last 8 years. And although it's not impossible someone might have just come over from the Oxhorn Movies channel, it is probably an alt. Loads of YouTubers set them up under brand accounts because back in the day, it was an easy way to upvote videos in case they got bombed. As a side note, Can people start referencing in the description or the pinned comment, why did you put it on screen? Are you a boomer, mate? I think Oxhorn, like some other creators I've encountered in the past, really overestimate the sensitivity of an audience and just try and completely shield them from possible transgressions they may have committed. It started as an attempt to remove some of the incriminating videos, and it's clearly gone over the line. And then when the videos became too much to handle, he made a response video and a response comment where he somewhat addresses the claims but similarly downplays some and misrepresents others to preserve the image. But I really think if he just said what had happened and just apologized, then this wouldn't have prolonged any further. Most audiences just want to enjoy the creators and be comfortable knowing they're supporting people who aren't terrible. Most people's bars aren't that high for past political and moral standards, especially if you're a Fallout YouTuber. To add to this, I understand why there are a surprisingly high number of people who want me to cover this, and I don't doubt they've probably reached out to other creators as well. But I think that people have been hesitant to pick this up because a lot of the videos are hard to follow in exactly what they've been trying to say, and bogged down in these sort of trivial points which tend to suppress the impact. It's kind of allowed Oxhorn to jump on the narrative that these people are toxic, and although some people clearly are, they're not without their legitimate criticisms, and going as far to end channels over it is quite ridiculous considering the quality of these videos in question. I have a hunch if he'd never reacted in the first place, we wouldn't be sitting here having this discussion today. And this isn't to say I think Oxhorn is a fantastic bloke who just needs a bit of good advice. Some of his old articles could be somewhat reflective of a mentality he might still hold. They come across as rather narcissistic. And as someone who personally also deals with a bit too much narcissism from time to time, I understand that you get the impression that people are completely out for you with bad intent, and you just want to wish they would shut up presenting this perspective which just isn't you anymore. I completely get that, but striking is not the answer. You gotta channel that into something better and showing them that you are better than them. Striking doesn't do that, it does completely the opposite. And for what has been done, I would apologize and be grateful that you still have your channel. But hey, that's just what I think. Maybe it's not easy to have sympathy for people who you perceive as acting with ill intent. For me though, I would never assume that someone has that intent inside of them just because they're against me. Have I dealt with people with ill intent? Sure, but it's not worth making that assumption. I know a lot of people have a real emotional connection to their channel and to these causes, and I wouldn't risk depriving them of that just because they said some mean things about me, which is what it came down to. And I've tried to be nice to Oxhorn today because I don't want to present a binary choice to people who may enjoy his content and his personality. They either have to agree with the criticisms and thus hate him, or disagree with all of them and love him, because then people will reverse the formula and derive their positions on the criticisms from how much they like their YouTubers, and you can never really find any resolution there. The truth is, when these things are brought up, people are prepared to forgive. If people are calling you out, most audiences won't just hear that and assume you're evil from now on. They want to hear your perspective. This situation has spiraled beyond anyone's comprehension, and I want to address it because there are some real messages to take away from it. If you're not a non or other variances, audiences aren't going to crucify you if you're honest and upfront about your mistakes. Don't try and destroy smaller channels because they make videos on you. Smaller channels aren't going to destroy your career. They're more just a way to casually keep your ego in check. Even if their criticisms aren't the best, they're normally rooted in some sentiment that you can link back to a point. If those criticisms aren't legitimate, then you can ignore them, and chances are they won't gain traction. If they are legitimate, they probably won't gain that much traction either. Just keep them in mind, address them in a post if you need to, then at least you've established your position. I don't support cancel culture, but you can't go in the absolute opposite direction and attempt to just wipe out any evidence of these things happening, because it doesn't change the fact that they happened, and people will still reflect on them. There is a lot that I haven't spoken about that other channels have, and generally that's because I don't think it adds to the narrative. People have said and done stuff on the internet, which we will be asked about, sometimes called out for. What matters is that we don't try and let the paranoia about presenting a squeaky clean image drive us to attempt to silence those voices, even if we think those voices are wrong or misled. So yes, we are at the end of the video again. I want to give a big shout out to the editors who've done a fantastic job as ever. I'm going to leave their links in the pinned comment below. Definitely go and check them out. Also, would love to hear your thoughts on this video, on the topic. It's an interesting one for sure. I'm sure a lot of my viewers do not know about it, but I wanted to have a discussion over it because sometimes it's good to bring these things to light, even if it's not too much of a common occurrence on my channel. I also want to give a big shout out to my Patreons. Thank you again. Some of them on screen right now. You guys are great. Thanks to my $50 Patreon, Some Hullabaloo, and my $200 Patreons, Brandon and Evening Steel. Your generosity is truly appreciated. Thank you guys very much. I don't have too much else to add today. If you want to find me, you can reach me on Twitter at The Right Opinion, Facebook too, Discord as well. I'm fairly accessible, I like to think so at least. But other than that, I don't really have too much else to say. So I guess I'll just leave it here. I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.